Welcome to the Dog Training Audio Experience Podcast. This is the podcast where you are going to get a lot of value when it comes to learning more about dog training, dog behavior, and beyond. I'm your host, Erica Gonzalez. I'm a certified dog trainer and behavior consultant and the founder of From Dusk Till Dog. Real quick, before we jump into the podcast today, if you like this podcast or my online content and would like to support my content, please check out our Patreon support page at patreon.com/From Dusk Till Dog. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast. Today's topic is going to be all about dogs and babies. We get asked about this a lot as dog trainers. So if you have kids or plan on having kids at some point and wonder what some best practices are to help set everybody up for success, then this is the episode for you. Here to help me discuss this topic is my guest, Ashley Meyer. She is a certified professional dog trainer and the owner of Fetching Potential, located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Also, she is now a mom herself to a newborn. And congratulations, first of all, Ashley, and welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I can't wait for this conversation.
Yeah, I feel like, I know you as a trainer and me, there's so many families out there, people planning on having a family in the future or currently going through this, or even just having young children, trying to figure out how to manage dogs and babies and kids. It could be a lot.
Yes, especially with COVID last year and everybody getting dogs and homeschooling with that. So yes, lots of families with dogs now and children. So
yeah. And shout out to all the families making all this work over the last while, I feel like, just trying to juggle life. So so I'm glad that we're going to touch on this. Obviously, there's several different things to consider with dogs and babies in the same household. And I did want to narrow it down to babies just because, when the baby starts crawling or moving, or you have younger children, 5 years old or whatever, this content's still going to help you. But I wanted to bring it down to baby stuff because you're personally going through it and it's fresh on your mind, I'm sure. But, it's going to depend on whether it's a newborn or a young child, or maybe you have kids already and now you're going to get a dog in the house, or you have a resident dog and you're going to bring kids coming into the home after the fact. So that being said, we're going to focus on some general tips and understanding around babies and our resident dog or dogs in your case and my case, as well as having more than one dog in the house. So let's jump right into it, Ashley. In terms of preparing, because that's so important. We're always talking about preparation, right? So babies arriving home, what are 2 or 3 main things you'd recommend making a plan for ahead of time for when the baby's going to come around? Anything that you would recommend for that?
Yes. So especially in the first 4 weeks, have a plan. So if you are giving birth or your partner is giving birth, or even if you're adopting, those first 4 weeks are a huge adjustment. If you're the one giving birth, then you're also healing. Whether it's C-section or natural, you are healing and there's a lot of change going on. So prep for those first weeks. I actually recommend putting on your baby registry a dog walker.
Yes.
So donate to a fund for a dog walker. So that way your dogs can continue to get their walks because you're going to be exhausted. And that way if it's not financially possible for you and your family to hire a dog walker, putting that on the registry and giving people a chance to help you through that is a great option to continue to give your dogs exercise. And then again, with that prep for those first 4 weeks, preparing enrichment. So things like Kongs, put them in the freezer.
Yes.
If you go for a walk, collect different items that you find on walks that your dogs find interesting, like leaves or sticks or dirt. Put those in a box and let your dog sniff them a few weeks later.
A little sensory box, kind of like a sniff box. I love that.
Exactly. So using anything in your home to have a different way to feed your dog is just a great, easy enrichment option.
Love enrichment stuff for sure.
Oh, it's so
So
helpful.
it is like the best thing ever. I love enrichment. Anyone who follows my content, I mean, I'm sure you post a ton of stuff about that too. Like enrichment is amazing and highly
Yes.
recommended.
Well, and it's so good for our dogs and their
Mm-hmm.
mental well-being
Yeah,
to provide that. So, and
for
then
sure.
if you do have multiple dogs, figuring out how you're going to handle playtime. So they're going to
Mm-hmm.
play. How are you going to manage that with a new baby? So my dogs have actually, we've conditioned them to go outside. So when they start to
Okay.
play, I'll ask them to go outside because it is summertime. It's not freezing
Mm-hmm.
yet here in Minnesota. So
Mm-hmm.
I have that opportunity to send them outside. We also have a
Great.
bunch of gates up. So I send them to a specific location of the house
Love
and
it.
they can play there.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, then the other thing that I would recommend planning for is what you're going to do with your dogs during daily activities. So we always want active supervision with dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are scrolling on Facebook, that's not going to be active supervision.
Mm-hmm.
Where is your baby going to be and where is your dog going to be?
Great.
Um, if you're cooking, same thing. If you go to the bathroom, is the dog coming with you or is the baby coming with you? So
Yeah.
running through those daily activities that you do where you aren't actively supervising your dog and you wouldn't
Mhm.
actively be supervising your child, where are they both going to be and what safety measurements are you going to have in place?
I have to say, all that is amazing and very important. And I've actually never heard of, in all this time doing this, have never heard of the idea of putting the dog walker on the baby registry or the gift registry. That is a phenomenal idea. And I just want to repoint that out. I mean, all of them were very important, but I want to repoint that out because, yeah, it is an expense. It's an additional thing. And, it's
Right.
definitely going to be mentioned during this episode that our dogs still have to get out and they have to go get their exercise, get outside. And if you can't do that, or you don't want to do it, in all honesty,
Yeah.
you're freaking exhausted, or you need to, tend to your baby right now. And not that, the dog doesn't matter anymore, but if you can hire help to help you out with that, I highly recommend doing that and having that be a gift option from somebody who wants to already gift you and congratulate you on your new baby is
Right.
really good idea. So I love that idea. I wanted to point that out again because I think that's genius. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, all that is super important, Ashley. I love those points. And in addition to that, too, like some other things that people could think about outside of those important ones. I, want to also stress, I tell people, hey, like you already said, right? What do you imagine your day is going to look like once baby comes around? Are you going to be waking up at a different time? Are you going to be feeding your dog at a different time? Things like that. So just kind of planning that out, but having some basic skills for your dog. I mean, some people's dogs are a great house dog and they're around with them, but they might not know a lot. So just even if it's basic stuff, like you said, hey, let's cue them to go to their playpen or crate area or out in the yard for a moment or behind a baby gate. And so I like having a couple basics in place if you have time, of course, if you're aware that you're planning this and have a couple months or whatever to work on that. Leave it is a huge one I train with. I'm sure you do as well, like having that to stay away from baby things or around the baby in general, or just to kind of, have some separation. I love place training as well. And lastly, just kind of getting your dog or dogs used to being either confined or baby gated away from you or doors shut behind you. Where like my Chihuahua Freddie, I mean, if I go up and down, I go upstairs, he follows me upstairs. And I go downstairs and I go, oh crap, I forgot the thing upstairs. I go upstairs, he follows me upstairs. And I'm like, dude, I'm coming right back. He's just up my butt 24 hours a day. And we've worked on certain things. He's okay if I need to leave him and stuff like that, but he's a shadower. So if all of a sudden your dog's like Freddie and now you have a baby that you need to shut the door, and your dog might now get stressed, let's start testing out doing things like that ahead of time so that we have a heads up if your dog is going to have a panic attack when you close the bedroom door behind you all of a sudden, or the bathroom, like you said.
Yeah.
I haven't gone to the bathroom alone in a long time unless I shut the door. So I do have to do that. I'm sure many of us with dogs feel the same. So yeah, really good stuff. And, I think there will be lifestyle changes, speaking of that, and changes across the board for everybody, humans and dogs included. So what are a couple things you would have people consider about the change, of what might change and how they can try to best prepare for those changes in their schedule and kind of their day-to-day lifestyle?
Yeah. So one thing, obviously, is you have way less time to give them attention.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about this already with the passive
Mm-hmm.
enrichment, but giving them that enrichment is going to be so beneficial because you can give them something to do and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to feel guilty about not being able to give them that attention. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so so my baby is going to be 3 months old soon. And it is developmentally normal for her naps to be between 30 and 45 minutes. So
Okay.
you don't get that 3 hour stretch or 2 hour stretch of nap time where I
Mm-hmm.
can work with the dogs,
Mm-hmm.
or I can clean the house. So it's only those 30 to 45 minutes. And obviously, some babies are outliers and will give you that 2 hours. But normally, you
Mm-hmm.
get short naps, and things are always changing with babies because they develop so quickly in that first year.
Right.
So keep that in mind. Have a plan for how you want to interact with them. So I choose one nap a day to take the dogs out to the backyard, and we play
Okay.
fetch. We work on training, and that's my bulk of attention that they get until she goes down for bedtime at night, and then we
Mm-hmm.
have cuddle time.
Okay.
Um, so the other thing to be aware of is if your dog is noise sensitive, then
Mm-hmm.
you need to be aware that babies make a lot of strange noises.
Mm-hmm.
And my baby just started screeching, so she learned how to use that high register.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yes. So, making sure that your dog is comfortable with those sounds. So, while you're pregnant, while you're planning to adopt, uh,
Mm-hmm.
play randomly those sounds. There's an app, I think it's on both iPhone and Android. It's for sure on Android, but it's
Mm-hmm.
called Baby Sounds. That's the name of it.
Love it. Pretty simple. We could find that. Also
Yeah,
YouTube. Like yeah,
yeah,
like I use a lot of stuff on there because you can find anything on there these days.
you can. So,
Yeah.
and the app is like each one is between 3 and 10 seconds long. So they're not very
Great.
long, but that's perfect for training.
Mm-hmm.
You can play it. It's a short duration. You can turn the volume way down and then build it up to uh, full volume and multiple different sounds
Cool.
as your dog gets comfortable. So those are probably my top two things to
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind, and prepping your dog for. So yeah.
All the changes. There's so much changes. Good stuff. All good stuff that needs to happen. But it's a lot of moving parts. And as a family, or even if you're, doing it by yourself, is
Yeah.
prepping. So that way it's less stress on you at the end of the day of, oh my God, what am I going to do now? What do I have to get done? If you have time to plan it, plan ahead. So that way it's less stressful. And with the scheduling changes and things, I think other changes that people don't necessarily think of until baby's in the house already. And if we can know ahead of time, again, that's a little bit better and you get a leg up. But sometimes the rules, quote unquote, for those just listening, I'm using air quotes, the rules of the house or whatever you're like, okay, that your dog does or not okay that your dog does, might change once the baby's around. So something like jumping all over the furniture, which normally maybe, for this family that I'm hypothetically talking about, might not be a problem. And now all of a sudden you have the baby in your arms and you're about to sit on the couch and your dog's looking up at you like, yeah, it's time to jump up, man. And you're like, oh no, wait a minute. I don't want this right now anymore. If you think any rules are going to change or boundaries in the house that might be adjusted or put in place that weren't there before. Prepping and practicing with your dog even just a little bit before baby comes would be a good thing. Even moving around the car, like some people just kind of throw their dogs in the back seat and everything's fine, and now you have a car seat back there with your baby and you're like, oh wait, I have to restrain my dog or put them in a travel crate or put them up front or whatever it is that people want to do. And your dog might be like, why the hell are we changing this? This is uncomfortable. I'm not used to it. So thinking about those lifestyle changes as well, I think are, in addition to that, really important. So
I love that you brought that up.
mm-hmm.
Another piece that a lot of people don't think about with those lifestyle changes and boundary changes is sleeping. So you cannot actively supervise when you're asleep. And for a lot of families, this might not be your family, but for many families, the baby sleeps in the same room as the parents for at least a few weeks up to a year. And since we cannot be actively supervising, if your dog sleeps in your bed with you, then that's might need to change. So with our dogs never slept in our bed with us, but that was my husband's rule. But they have their own beds in our room, but they still had access to the bassinet. So I actually tethered them. So I had a really long leash and I put it under our dresser that's in our room.
Nice.
That way they could move around, they can spin, because our dogs like to spin before they lay down, of course.
Yes.
There's no risk for choking because the leashes are so long. But they still can't get to baby. So they can't get to the bassinet. So thinking about those things, does your dog need to be crated at night now? Can you use a tether? Or is it safer for your dog to be out of the room at night?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because Freddie sleeps in our bed, and all four of my stepkids are older and they're not babies by any means. But, if I'm thinking about if there was a baby in the room, that's something to, think about. And it could be a concern if your dog is in the middle of sleeping and all of a sudden baby wakes up and, like you said, is in that high register all of a sudden, like Whitney Houston style, and they're like, whoa, like at 2 a.m. It can be startling, and you never know how, our dogs mean well overall, but they might get startled, they might get upset, they might get worried, concerned about something, movement in the bassinet when they're not used to that in the middle of the night can, some dogs can get protective over the baby or over the noise they're hearing. So there's so many possibilities. Best to opt out of having any of the possibilities negatively that might happen there. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well, because a lot of dogs sleep in the room.
Right. And when your baby's a little older at toddler stage, when they're in their toddler bed, a lot of times kids have their own mind and don't sleep through the night. So they might end up utilizing gates at doorways could be another option to have your toddler. So if your toddler gets out of their bed, either a gate at their room that you can easily open or a gate at your room, so that there's never that initial contact during the middle of the night when your dog isn't expecting it.
Yeah, management for your dog, but management for your kid as well. We need management all across the board when you have kids and dogs around.
That is for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, anyone who's listened to any of my other stuff, and really all the trainers around, I mean, we're going to first touch on management before we even really do a lot of hands-on training stuff, as we need those management things in place. So yeah, baby gates, I'm a huge fan of baby gates. I love it. And PS, I do want to say this because it just popped into my brain. So here we go. But I use a gate currently with my two dogs, and I don't have a kid, and it's for other reasons. But even as a trainer, I right now, without any like big events or big circumstances, still utilize a gate. Now it's a cute little wooden one from Home Goods that looks a little bit different than a baby gate, whatever you want to get. But there are times where I either separate Jade and Freddie, if you have multiple dogs and a kid. So thinking about if a kid was around, if you, want to separate your two dogs and then go upstairs with you want to give both of your dogs a Kong, but now you're worried about both of them, going after the same Kong or bothering each other. Okay, let's separate the two dogs and go upstairs with baby behind, in the bedroom or wherever we're going to do our stuff. And then, I use it sometimes when I'm answering the door. If you have guests coming in, especially when you have a kid, people are going to want to come visit and see the baby and say hi and check in on you. If you don't want your dogs, or, in the nicest way, you don't want to deal with your dogs with the front door and the baby and everything else, gate it up. So I'm all about gates, and I like to disclose that I still on occasion utilize them.
Yeah.
So yeah, nothing wrong with baby gates. I think they're great.
Yeah, we've used them ever since we got 2 dogs when we added Bailey to our household. Yeah, like you said, they're very useful.
Yeah, I'm glad we can let people normalize the gates. And, speaking of kind of gating and boundary setting in the house, there's a huge debate, we all know, about baby's room, or, as the kid gets a little bit older and maybe not sleeping in the bedroom, like you said, after the first year or however long people wait for that sort of thing. But should the dog be allowed in the baby's room or not? Big debate around that. And so what are your thoughts on that, and maybe options to consider for people? And I know it'll depend, like a lot of things with dog training, but what are your initial thoughts on dog allowed in baby area, baby room?
Yes. So it is very dog and family dependent, but one thing to keep in mind, if your dog is a resource guarder of space or objects, that's a definite no for me. So that's a time when I would use a baby gate at the doorway, and that dog would not be allowed in. Obviously, I hope you're working through that resource guarding, but why take the chance if you can manage the situation with a gate? So some dogs have separation anxiety. So Bailey, my younger dog, she has some separation anxiety. She's a shadow dog, very much so. So in the beginning, I was letting her in with me all the time because it made her feel comfortable. And so with the addition of the added stress of a baby, she was already stressed. So I wasn't going to ask her to be separated from me at that time. But now we've slowly worked up to, she can be on the other side of the gate and she's okay. She can still see us. She can hang out. And if she wants to, she can leave the area and she usually does choose that when baby's crying.
She's like, I'm good. You handle it, Mom.
Yeah, I'm done. See ya. But the main thing is you want to know your dog well. So if your dog can listen to you while you're busy, so say your back is turned, can your dog sit if you ask for a sit with your back turned to them? If you have your hands full of something and you ask for a down or an off, or you even ask them to leave the room, can they do that while you're doing normal baby caring things?
Yes.
And that's something that you practice. Yeah, that's something you can definitely practice while you're waiting for baby's arrival. Is just doing that. But if your dog can't do those things, then I would recommend maybe while you're feeding, while you're trying to put baby to sleep, and while you're doing diaper changes, maybe those are times when dog is out of the room because you can't actively work with them to get them out.
Right, opt out. You can opt out.
Yeah. Whereas when maybe baby's on the floor or in a carrier or something like that, and you have a little bit more hands-free time, you can work with the dog to get those behaviors.
Yeah. I love that you said, like, you could practice this beforehand, like whether, we've all walked in with too many groceries. I'm trying to be like the Hulk and do like one visit back to the house with everything. My dogs are always in the way right at the door, like, hey, and I'm like, can you get out of my way? So, even just trying to work with them when you have some groceries in your hand or the trash, or, you're heading out to bring the trash out or whatever, to see if your dogs can respond. It's a great point on that. And I do agree. I think it's a personal preference about how it's going to go. And I love that you said know your dog.
Yes,
that's the main thing. Like Freddie would do better if I didn't, like if I did I know right now I can say with certainty, if I had a baby in this room and I closed him out, he would be doubly stressed. He'd be like, well, what the hell's that thing with mom in there? And why is the door shut now and I'm sitting here? He would cry. So if I let him in and I asked him to go lie down on his bed, he would gladly go and do that and be much calmer. Now he still might be like, okay, there's this thing over there. To a dog, a baby's like a thing. They don't really know what's going on right away. So, they're looking up at baby. They might be a little concerned, but if you feel like your dog's going to do better, like you said, with your dog, definitely know your dog. It's going to be a preference. And I do think if, I'm a huge fan of place, like with families I worked with this. Place is probably my number one used behavior in my house.
Mine too.
Place. Yeah. Oh, good. See? All right. Lovely. Place is like the number one. So whether that's when I'm cooking, go to place. When I'm eating, go to place. When I need you out of my way for a moment because I'm walking back and forth. And Jade, our pit bull, we have named her lovingly the queen of the transition, which means any room that's transitioning to another area. So like the walkway, the doorway, the entryway, she lays right in the middle. So we call her the queen of the transition.
I wonder if it's a pit bull thing because mine do that too.
I'm like, Jesus, you have the whole room. Can you just pick another spot? So, I've had to work with her a lot with I say out. So she exits the area, or I say place and she goes to her place. So place is a big one. And if you could get your dog to do that, then I would work on that even in the baby's room. So if you want to start, it's even down the line when you feel a little more comfortable, you have your bearings, start working with, on the other end of the room, you're here with baby at the crib or the bed, and you have your dog's bed over here or a spot for them so that when you're doing things in there, they know what they should be doing when you're in that room. So kind of giving them that place task or bed task when they're in there is key. And I've definitely used that a lot with families when we're working on some of those next steps together.
Yes. And one other thing I might mention, a lot of people, or to a lot of dogs, when people crouch or sit on the floor, it is an invitation to interact. So make sure that your dog understands that that isn't always the case, because you are going to spend a lot of time on the floor with baby, and dogs can't always be in your lap during that time. So just a little side note, my dogs are that way, and I didn't work hard enough at that before baby came.
You're like, oh no, they're like, hey, you're down here. Oh yeah, these are such important points. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Ashley. I think a great way on that note, I think a great way to help with it is just have your dog go to place or in a stay or in a downstay or whatever you want to do, whatever works for them. Move a foot or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 away and I do like a bend down to tie your shoe bit as a distraction. So I'll like kind of bend down and undo my shoelace, go over, reward them, don't trip on your shoelace, come back, put the shoelace back in a bow, work on just kind of crouching, bending down, then immediately rewarding your dog before they think about getting up. So that becomes kind of like a distraction, if you will. And I also do sitting on the couch. That's a big, I know, that's a big one. It's almost equally like crouching. It's like, okay, it's time to jump up on your lap. It's time to come up on the couch. So if you want to start having your dog not default to that, have them go to place, have them do it down, and then I do like an air squat. So I don't even touch the couch on the first one. I'm just like, boop, and then right back over to reward the dog. And then we work up to actually putting a butt in a seat. So kind of slow, go a little slow with that if your dog has trouble, like my two sure did when I first started trying to work on that.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I think you touched a little bit on this with the sounds earlier. So I kind of want to go into that a little bit more because there's so much other prep we can do. And I also want to say, yes, with dog training, there's a lot of moving parts. Things can seem complex. And as a trainer, I always kind of think things are complex, and not in a negative way, but I'm like, oh, there's this, there's that, there's management, there's enrichment, there's this, there's exercise. I got to do this. There's a lot of parts if you really boil it down, but this is attainable. Anyone can do this stuff as easy as a gate and a Kong can save your life. It doesn't have to be very daunting. It can seem daunting, and it can be if you wanted it to be, but you can make it pretty easy and simple and just break it down to 2 or 3 main things you want to kind of focus on, and that's it. So I did want to just say that as we continue to dive in, a little caveat or disclaimer, like, hey, I know we're talking about a lot of things and you could practice some of them. You might not get to all of them, and that's okay. You work on it as best as you can. So, okay. So although baby will be new to your dog, there's also a lot of other new things that come along with baby. So there's, toys and car seats and high chairs and little swing things that I wish they made an adult version for, because I would definitely sit in that, and sounds and stuff. How can people help their dog be more comfortable with the items and the sounds, and what are some things you would recommend that people can do for that?
Yes. So I'm not sure if you can hear baby. I just want to let your listeners know that she's not neglected. She has a babysitter.
Yes, no worry. Thank you for saying that, just in case. We scheduled this when Ashley has some help during this time. So,
yes, so
real life, folks.
Let you know. So my first recommendation, as you begin to accumulate things after your baby shower or as you buy things, let your dog investigate them on their own time. So with anything baby related, you don't want to force interactions. So my dog Bailey is a nervous Nelly, and anything that has sudden movements that she doesn't expect to move is really scary for her.
Sure.
And so the stroller was a big deal for her. And so we did a lot of practice around the stroller moving, the stroller opening up, and making sure that she was comfortable with that. But at first, we just let her sniff it for a few days. So she'd go over and sniff it and then be like, okay, this is a little scary still. So she'd leave it alone.
Okay.
But again, never force interactions with anything baby related, because you don't want that negative association to transfer to all baby things.
Yes. So important. Real quick, can I just say, I don't mean to interject on you, but that's so, so important. It's almost like if somebody, I know people who are comfortable with bugs, and I can't stand it. Like I could deal with dogs growling at me and I don't even bat an eye, but a bug flying near me, I'm all of a sudden crazy. And anyway, I don't know if that's a deeper problem, but it's a problem for me. And it's almost like, I've had people that have something in their hand. They're like, oh, look at this bug. And there's, or little kids in my family, and they're like, hey, and they're almost bringing it up to you. And you're like, whoa, don't bring it into me. I'll look at it from a distance, and maybe if I want to come check it out. But if all of a sudden it's coming into my space without my consent, now I'm even more freaked out. So I did want to just kind of use that analogy, because what you said there is something I want to help people really point to, is I think people bring things closer to the dog, like, here, smell it. And or look at it, and they're like, whoa, 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 let them approach it.
That is a great analogy. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're all good at dog trainers have the best analogies, in my opinion.
Yes.
Maybe I'm biased, but
yeah, no, it's true, because you have to think about what the easiest way to understand it. And it's easy to put things into human terms. So
yeah. So I'm sorry. So go ahead, continue. I want to hear the rest of these. These are so good.
Yes. So if you find that something does bother your dog, say, so like with the stroller, I can't just leave food out, because my 2 dogs are resource guarders over food against each other. So I did mini training sessions where if I noticed that she was approaching it, I would put my other dog away and just toss treats for her.
Love it.
Near the stroller. So the treats weren't directly coming from me. They were always landing near the stroller. And so use treats, use your dog's daily kibble to just continue to create that positive association with something that they might kind of freak them out or they're unsure about.
Yeah.
I like telling people to practice loose leash walking with the stroller. If your dog cannot loose leash walk right now, get the loose leash walking down before adding the stroller. So then add that once you feel comfortable with your dog walking on a loose leash. Use the baby wearing wrap. So if you're going to wear your baby, sometimes that can make us look a little bit different, and our dog can be like, well, you kind
What's
of
that?
pounds.
Yeah.
So you can put on the baby wrap, put a sack of potatoes in there, and
Yep.
this is a time where you can ask for a sit from your dog, ask them to go to their place, because you look different, you're acting a little different, you might be moving a little bit different.
Yeah.
So see if they can follow their cues
Love that.
when you're wearing the wrap. Practice swaying and bouncing. Normal people don't just sway and bounce, but when it's 3 a.m. and you're trying to get your baby to go back to sleep,
Yes.
you're going to sway and bounce. So your dog might not be used to that. So practice that. And kind of like you said with the couch, do little bounces and then reward your dog, and then do bigger bounces or bigger sways. Kind of work up to that full motion of swaying and bouncing.
A lot of choreography,
It's a lot of choreography.
Dog training can be very choreographed in how it is, and I think that's important too, because I was just talking to another guest about this. Yes, we want to choreograph it and kind of set these up. And to your point, then you do want to kind of add in that element of surprise, if you will, or kind of not so choreographed. Like once your dog's doing well, then you do want to kind of look more normal and not so proper in the training setting, because you're not always going to look like that either. So great point with the swaying. I didn't even think about that, the swaying stuff.
Yeah, I worked with a family whose dog really struggled with that strange movement. So we had to work through that. And another thing that you can do to keep the sessions not choreographed once your dog is to that point is have little treat spots throughout the house. So use dollar store Tupperware and you can use kibble, you can use freeze-dried treats. That way you can surprise them with a goodie. They do well.
Little treat stations. I highly recommend that too. Just having every room that you think you might have a moment with your dog to reinforce something, to distract them, to get them out of the way, whatever it is, emergency stash. But I would have, like you said, little mason jars or Ziploc bags, or throw it in a drawer somewhere, but have them in different areas. So that way you're prepared. You don't have to run to the one bag that's in the one cupboard in the kitchen every time you want to reward your dog, which is not going to work out very well.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I mean, I love that. The stroller thing is huge for people wanting to, they have this idea of walking the dog with the stroller, start off slow, maybe in your home, even if you have an area you can kind of move the stroller a little bit once your dog's to that point, of course, and even just without a leash, just kind of moving it around with your dog kind of following you for some food and just kind of reinforcing them, then adding the leash in. So we could do a whole nother episode on exactly how to train some of this. So maybe part 2 with babies at some point. But yeah, like intro one thing at a time. Don't try to do, the high chair and the stroller and the swing, like all in the same session necessarily. You want to take it low and slow, create positive associations. And the biggest thing is making your dog feel safe. The question is, do they feel safe around this? Do they seem apprehensive or not? And also, like, consider scents of things, your baby powder, the lotions, the things you're going to be bringing around, making sure your dog feels okay about those as well, and just kind of exposing them to that the same way I would with like an ear cleaner I'm going to use on my dogs, or any wipes that I'm going to use for them, to make sure that they don't view it as negative. And then, like you said, the sounds. Get on YouTube, get that baby sounds app, get started on some of those sounds, because your dog's not used to hearing them. So unless you've had a child in your house before, they're not going to be aware of what that is. So, I know, practicing ahead of time is always ideal, but what are 1 or 2 scenarios that, people, I want to talk a little bit about like feeding and holding the baby. And and I think we already kind of touched on this, so maybe we could pass over this question, but did we miss anything in terms of like proactive practice? Because I know I want to talk about the stroller walking, and you touched great on that. And then like feeding, whether that's with the baby. And I think you touched on that too, just kind of being able to direct your dog. Did we miss anything there, or we can move on to the next question? Because I feel like we touched on it.
The only thing that I would recommend practicing ahead of time is separation.
Yes.
'Cause it's inevitable that your dog is going to be separated from you at some point when you have
Mm-hmm.
a child.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that us parents can stay sane is
Yeah.
if we can give ourselves breaks. So make sure that your dog is able to be behind a gate or is
Yeah.
able to be in a pen or behind a closed door or on a tether. So making sure they're comfortable with that and working through any issues that arise. And I want to mention this, if you are worried about your dog with anything that we've touched on, hire someone.
Yes.
You don't have to go through this alone. You don't have to try and figure out how to balance it all because you're already stressed and prepping for a baby. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have your dogs add to that stress. So hiring someone who's really knowledgeable about different situations. So if your dogs do struggle with separation, hire a special or
Yes.
hire a separation anxiety specialist,
Yeah.
um, and things like that. So resource
Yeah.
guarding, hire a resource guarding specialist.
Yeah.
It's it's so helpful and you will get your money's worth out of it
Hmm.
in
I
the long
have
run.
to say, I wish that if you haven't worked with, a qualified positive reinforcement trainer in the past, or it's not like fresh in your mind, I would say even if you have no problems, even if you
Yeah.
feel like you got it, I really feel like hiring a trainer, there's things you said that I'm like, oh wow, I've been working with families and babies for a while, and unless it's a problem, I might not think about that.
Yeah.
Or the sense of the lotions, another trainer might focus on something else. Yeah, like so I think it's always good to have another set of eyes to
Yeah.
say, oh, I noticed this, especially a professional that's going to realize maybe your dog is uncomfortable with something that you think they're quote unquote fine about. A professional dog trainer is going to look at it. I've had plenty of people who think their dog is loving it, and they are not loving it. They are opposite of loving it. So it's good to have that. I'm glad that you touched on that.
Yeah. Well, and even as a dog trainer, I hired a dog trainer when my dogs
Yes.
were struggling with resource guarding because I knew I wasn't seeing the full picture because I'm emotionally invested.
Yes, they're
So,
your dogs. Oh my God, I love you for saying that. Thank you. We need help sometimes outside of ourselves. A
yeah,
therapist might have their own therapist.
exactly.
They can't treat themselves all the time. I mean, it might be a little bit more helpful, but it's
Yeah.
totally fine and normal. So I'm so glad that you said that. And so hiring help is always a win. It's only going to be a benefit. It's definitely not going to hurt anything. So,
Right.
make sure you hire somebody qualified and that knows,
Yeah.
has experience with this. But okay, so I'm going to kind of put these two questions kind of together.
Yeah.
Uh, Here comes the big moment. We've had the baby, we're exhausted, I'm assuming, and ready to go home. And now dog might be there, waiting for you. And how people always ask, like, how should we introduce them? We've all seen the YouTube video examples of, like, in the dog trainer world, of how not to do it. A
Yes.
lot of quote unquote cute videos of my dog meeting my baby, and all dog trainers are like, oh God. uh yeah, like, oh God, I get anxiety watching most of those. And again, I don't fault anybody, they're not professional trainers. But what are some things in terms of, we're going to be arriving home, like what the setup is and how the first initial hello, nice to meet you type of moment should look? So what are some tips for that and some things to look out for there?
So the first thing is it's not a free for all. Do not just set your baby's car seat down and let your dog get all up in their business. Your baby, even though they are helpless, they are an individual person
Mm-hmm.
and they cannot say no to a dog coming into their space. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
advocate for your child. And personally, a strange dog that I haven't met coming into my face makes me uncomfortable. So I would assume that my baby would feel uncomfortable in that situation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a free for all. Um,
Agree.
my as far as like the initial greeting, so you arrive home, you're in the park or in the garage, have one person go into the house, say hello to the dogs. It's probably been a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, get all of the dog's craziness out and in the greeting, and then have the other person stay with the baby, and then you switch. So then the person who said hi to the dog stays with the baby, and then the other person can go into the house and say hello to the dogs. And again, get those crazies out and wait for calm. So the initial greeting, we want to be calm. And then you can bring baby in their car seat. I recommend putting baby on a table or the counter so that there's some height.
Yep.
Your dog can smell them and does know that you brought something new home. I will say, don't stress about bringing home a blanket beforehand. You do not need to do that. For some reason, this piece of advice has become well known, and I think it's a little crazy, because we don't introduce our dogs to people. So if someone new comes to my door, I'm not going to ask them for a shoe before they're allowed to come into the house so that my dog can smell it.
Yeah. Hey, give me a handkerchief with your sweat on it. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the first step, is wait for that calm, then bring baby in. Again, wait for the calm again. Then maybe you bring baby behind a baby gate and put baby on the floor so that dog can see them. Have them be able to sniff and see. And remember that a relationship doesn't mean it has to be a physical interaction. We don't actually want physical interaction between babies and dogs because babies are pretty defenseless and they don't know how to control their muscles. So a dog can find it startling when a baby suddenly moves around.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I recommend just kind of moving on with our day after the dog sees it, the baby.
Great. Yeah.
Make it not a big deal. Be nonchalant about it. And when that inevitable foot sniff does happen, obviously don't freak out. I protect my baby's face. So hair sniffing is fine with me, but as soon as they move around to a cheek, I'm like, okay,
we're done.
I have a touch over here, or I ask for a sit so that they are doing something else instead of sniffing of the face. So
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I do things. Remember to use all of your management tools. I like to use the analogy, actually my mentor used the analogy of cake, where dogs and babies are kind of like oil and water. They don't naturally mix together. But when you add a few more ingredients like flour and sugar, and that flour and sugar is things like our gates and our pens, our Kongs for distractions, then you get this beautiful cake. And
I like that.
It produces a wonderful outcome.
Yeah, like if you're missing an ingredient, also on that analogy, because I've used the analogy of ingredients too, and it's like if you miss a few ingredients, it's not going to come out so great, so it has a potential to not taste so good, not be so great. I love that cake. I like that. And you said something that just triggered something for me. So here we go again off the cuff here with the blanket thing.
Yes.
Because I've been training now for, I don't know, it's been almost a decade. Oh my God, I feel really old saying that. But anyway, that's fine. I'll take it. But anyway, early Erica also thought that was a great idea. Like, sure, hey, take a blanket or take a sock from the beach, whatever. Great. And now, like, I'm listening to you say that, I'm like, yep. Like it's not such a big thing. It's not going to like make or break the difference between your dog introducing to your baby,
Right.
But I did realize that I have, because I just remember this, I have used a version of that in a different way. And I did want to touch on it. If you have, so there's certain dogs, I'm sure you've seen it, where they're like, really, like you could see in their face and their eyes are like really infatuated with like wanting to sniff the baby, and probably almost every dog, like really like this, like wanting to sniff and very curious about the smell. where if like they put it up, put the car seat up on the counter or the table, now the dog might be like jumping on the table or trying to climb up on the chair to like get to, like they're really kind of almost frantic about getting up there.
Yeah.
Where then I might say, hey, if they have a blanket or a sock that they're okay kind of in that moment, we want to maybe remove it and plate, like either hold it or like place it somewhere away from baby for them to kind of get that initial like, okay, I get all the scent of that baby in this versus them initially to kind of help die down. I have seen it help the dog just kind of lower the arousal levels of like wanting to get in there and get a good whiff of it. Not that it's going to totally diminish it, but I have seen it in that moment specifically to help them a little bit with that. So that's only a time where I've found that it's actually going to help in the moment there when they're greeting each other.
That's a good,
what do you think about that
difference? Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
It's very different bringing something for them to smell in beforehand versus when they know that something's different and letting them investigate that way, because that's a safe way to let them sniff the baby.
Yeah, like I've just had dogs that I'm like, ooh, it's gonna be a long time before we can get them to even like get near the baby at all. Like we don't want them to. So I'm like, here you go. Like you sniff this a lot first, because I do that with dog to dog stuff too. Like if we're training in the moment, I'll like grab the collar or something off the dog and just let them kind of get it so that when they do get close to each other, it's not such an infatuation in the moment. But yeah, interesting.
Cards. I don't know if you've heard of those.
What'd you say?
Dog postcards. This is tangent.
Oh, please. I like tangents. So you could go through that.
I have a dog reactive dog who doesn't really have any friends besides our other dog because he thinks that all other dogs are stupid, which is fine. He lives a very happy life without dog friends.
Yes.
But my friend has a dog reactive dog as well. And we took a paper towel, rubbed it all over our dog, put it in a baggie and exchanged them.
Yeah, scent exchange.
Yes, and our dogs, 10 minutes, both of them were just sniffing that paper towel. So that's another passive enrichment option as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, back to your scent box thing, like that's how much dogs really like to smell stuff, especially new things. So yeah, great point. And before we get to the final point of this, I had a note for myself too on that question of, I want to say this because I know this is a thing and I know you're going to agree, is I see so many pictures, videos, stories of baby on, you don't really want to avoid your baby, especially an infant or a newborn or even, a young child being right at eye level with the dog. And that's why we're saying, put it up on the counter, put the car seat up here, have them smell their feet or, to kind of protect the baby a little bit. Don't have them just like right there in the middle of the room on the floor. But I've seen people do this and the dog is going over and really licking the baby everywhere. And I think there's this misconception that the dog's loving it. The dog's kissing the baby, kisses. And I'm not saying that when Jade licks me, it's not sometimes out of affection or she's excited or happy, or Freddie does it, that, yes, there's times where my dogs lick me and I think they're having a blast and they're happy and they're calm and they're loving me, right? But obsessive or excessive licking, in my opinion, I'd love to hear what you think, is usually not a go. It's not good for me, especially with a newborn, especially with a baby. It is weird and awkward and just not, in my opinion, it's like, like if they're just a little bit too much, they're running too hot is what I would say, air quotes, like running a little too hot. And I want to cool them down. So I just, do you see that a lot or hear of that? Because I mean, how many videos have we seen of dogs like licking the baby everywhere and everyone thinks it's adorable and they all have their phones out taking videos. Again, I'm not shaming people, they don't know. But as a trainer, it's anxiety producing for me.
For sure. Yes, I view excessive licking as anxiety.
Yes, same.
And there's the lick to dismiss, where a dog will walk up, lick the baby, and maybe kind of walk away. And that's kind of their like, you know what, I'm done. I don't I don't want
Get
this.
out of here.
Yeah. So that's another thing to be aware of, is a dog coming up and licking a child, or if a child enters the dog space and the dog licks them, that's not always a welcome to my
Yeah.
space type of lick.
Exactly. It's not humans. It's not like I'm going, oh, I love you. You know, it's not
Right.
that. We do that, but dogs usually do not do that in that way.
Right.
Yeah. I'm so glad we touched on that, because that's something I see a lot, even with adults. Like, I've gone into homes and the dog, like, I could tell they're running a little hot. I sit on the couch and they jump up on the couch next to me and they start rubbing me, rubbing up on me, and they seem excited, but now they're like licking excessively and their eyes look like wide like this. And I'm like, okay, like, let's take a break. So yeah. So on that note, final question, body language. Very
Yes.
important. And body language can be licks and movement oriented as well. It's not just like, these things that are maybe less, there's lower end stuff and there's higher end stuff that I think the higher end stuff people notice more. The growling, the lunging, the big ones, people kind of know. But, living with dogs in general, body language is important. So what would you say are a couple body language signals that you talk to people about and families about, and even yourself, are on the lookout when a baby's around, or even, again, this is going to be helpful for people with young kids or children in the house in general. So what are a couple of your top 2 or 3 body language signals that you focus on educating people about?
Yes. So I actually have 4 that I mentioned to every family.
Yes.
I have lip licks. So anytime a dog licks his lips, or even the full mouth lick, or you might not even see the tongue, you just kind of hear the smack, that is a low level of stress. And I want to point out that stress can be good or bad. So you might see this lip lick when you go for a walk. So that doesn't mean it's bad stress. It just means that a level of the amount of the hormone cortisol is in their body, and that's how they're presenting it and behaviorally.
Yes.
But if it deals with a child, then say you're holding your child and your child suddenly makes a noise, and you look over at your dog and you see that lip lick. That's probably more of a negative stress. And that's something to be aware of. And then a lot of times that lip lick can turn into a yawn. And a yawn is a little bit bigger of a stress because it's a bigger behavior.
Yeah, it's like a bigger movement. It's more exerting more energy. I got you. That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times you see those together. So you'll see a lip lick and then a yawn. You can tell the difference between a tired yawn and a stressed yawn. So a lot of times their lips will be tight. Their tongue might not do the full extension of a tired yawn. So be aware of the different types of yawns, and how your dog kind of presents that.
Love that. Yawns are such a big one.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that that's a sign of stress.
Yeah.
And then you have the head turns, and
like this.
You see some lip licks and then some head turns. My dog Bailey does a lot of head turns when she's nervous. She'll like look away and then kind of look back and look away. And that's a sign of appeasement. It's like she wants to keep the peace.
Right.
She doesn't mean any harm. But again, that's a little bit more of that's another increase in stress. So you've got lip licks at the bottom, then you've got yawns, and then you've got head turns.
Yeah.
And then you have whale eye, and whale eye is where you can see the whites of the dog's eyes.
Right.
And that's kind of my red flag for families. So if you see the head turn and then you see the dog's eyes turn toward what is stressing them out, and you're able to see those crescent moon shaped, that is a sign that they are getting really uncomfortable.
Yes.
And it's like the big red flag that I tell families to email me immediately with something that they have.
Right.
I also will have the parents remove the child from the situation. So if you whale eye, remove the child rather than maybe asking the dog to leave.
Yeah.
So
It's a
that
good point.
they get that space and they don't feel punished. So
Right. Like now you have to leave.
right.
Right.
Sometimes asking your dog to leave can be punishing for them.
Sure. That's a good point. I'm glad that you made that distinction because I think a lot of people go to like, get the dog out, and they're already uncomfortable. I'm not saying you should never ask them to get out or whatever you need to do. But yeah, if you could just pick your kid up and put them on the, again, depending on how old they are and all that,
Right.
if they're young, like able to walk around or stand, you put them on the other side of the gate for a moment, pick them up and just place them down or walk with them out of the room and then put the gate up. Something like that is also great. You can remove the dog, but you can also remove yourself and your child. So I'm glad that you said that. Those are the top ones for me too. Those are the biggest ones. A lot of Jade's the queen of head turns. Someone tries to like go in and hug her. She, a lot of dogs, by the way, on this note, a lot of dogs do not like to be hugged and basically put in a human headlock that we find very like loving. Most dogs feel very restricted and constricted when we're around them in both arms. So I do tell little kids, not infants, of course, but little children, try to pet or hug, if you will, with air quotes, with one hand only. So that way we don't get the embrace going on. So that way, if the dog does want to exit, they still feel like they can move away. We do want to avoid some of that anyway, but if you can't control kids all the time and the dog all the time. So if we can start educating children on how to interact. So I would say, obviously, like all of those. And then if you see like a tongue flick or a yawn or the head turn or the whale eye, and then your dog's ears are like really pinned back while they're doing that, also another level of like, I'm uncomfortable, I'm concerned, I don't want to be in this situation. And also like tight mouth, you alluded to that as well with the yawning. Like if your dog's mouth is, you ever talk to a person who's obviously uncomfortable and they're just pursed lips kind of deal, so kind of that version with dogs of a tight mouth, or if they're frozen, stiff. Like I always say, you really want wiggly jiggly body language with dogs as best as possible if we're going to dumb it down, which I love to do, to help us understand all of this, to say, hey, wiggly jiggly like Jello, not stiff. So if they are all doing any of those things and their body's like not moving a hair, then also probably a sign that they're like, I'm uncomfortable, please don't touch me, the baby's crawling this way, the sound is upsetting me, something's going on. So yeah, those are all big ones.
Yeah. And a lot of people call trainers when they're snapping or growling, which obviously please continue to do that. But also if you find that your dog is avoiding your child, and especially when they're an infant and not crawling around, if your dog is avoiding them, or you might see shaking, that's another time to call a trainer. Because even though your dog, you're like, oh, my dog just doesn't even care, it could turn into that escalation of stress, because as the baby gets older and starts becoming mobile, then the dog is less able to avoid.
So important. Oh my God. I'm glad that you're saying that at the end here, because like people do, and I don't blame people, but they do wait till it's bad things are happening. And although we're happy to help, but we would love to hear from you when you're like, I think something's going on, I'm not sure. You tell me, what should we do to prevent further potential problems? So I think that's really important, because just because a dog is avoiding, most people be like, oh, they just like get out of the way, like they're fine with it. They're not. If your dog's doing that, they're also not, again, speaking generally, they're probably not okay at the level that we would want them to be. And your dog doesn't necessarily need to be uncomfortable in the way of growling, snarling, biting, acting like what we would say is, Cujo level. You don't have to wait for that to get help, because yes, the dog that's quote unquote nervous and hiding in the corner, or, going under the couch if they're small enough, or just like running away, that dog can also bite if given the opportunity, like you said. So if they all of a sudden, now the dog has been around your baby for a few years and feeling kind of funky on a regular basis, and now the baby is chasing after them and hitting them over the head with a stuffed animal by accident and yelling and screaming and doing all the lovely things that toddlers do aside from all the good stuff, but we know there's stuff that's going to be hard for the dog and sometimes for the people in the house to deal with, because it's a growing human. Your dog might get more and more trigger stacked, as we call it, which is just, the strings getting thinner and thinner of their level of tolerance. So I want to leave us with, don't mistake, I say this to everybody, don't mistake tolerance for enjoyment.
Yes.
Just because your dog is not growling or snapping does not mean that they're loving it. It doesn't have to, it's not black and white like that. There is a middle. So we need to try to be aware of these things to try to make sure that they're not just tolerating everything that the kid's doing.
Yes, I tell families who are like, oh, my dog will be fine with my toddler or my baby. Like, I'm not concerned. They're not showing any signs. I tell them that that's great. I'm glad that their dog is so tolerant. We want to keep the tolerance.
Yes, you want to keep it that way. Let's do this stuff to make sure. Yeah, absolutely. And last point, I know I've said that already, but this is the last point. I made a meme once and I did really like it. So I try to remember it for these kids and dogs discussions is, as much as you want to train your dog to be good around your kid, you want to train your kid to be good around your dog. And so, what I mean by that is just, yes, we want to get our dogs, under control, quote unquote, to be able to have everybody coexisting well and have it be a positive experience. But you also, as your kid ages, of course, not when they're 3 months old, but when they're starting to understand concepts of this, you start teaching them little things, so that your child also understands how to treat the dog, how we treat animals in the house, that they deserve respect and space, and they deserve to eat alone if they want to eat alone, not have us over there, or not have toys taken away from them. You don't like when toys are taken away from you, right? So we don't want, our dog to feel like that. So educating your child along the way as well on how to be, and your dog is going to make it way, way easier. It's not just up to your dog to do well around your kid. It's also up to you to help your kid do well around your dog as well.
Well, and to that point as well, however your child sees you interact with your dog, they're going to mimic.
Preach.
And it's not just going to be with your dogs. It's going to be with the neighbors' dogs down the street. So keep in mind that if you go in and hug your dog and your dog is tolerant of that because you have a good relationship, just because you can do that doesn't mean your 2-year-old can do that the same way. So keep in mind your actions with your dog, and then imagine your toddler doing that with a stranger's dog, because they don't know better. They're they generalize it to everything until we teach them to the differences. So
preach. If anyone's watching this, I was just lifting my hand up in agreement, because it's so true, and if you're also, not for nothing, if you're doing negative things to your dog, and no one's perfect, but if you're screaming at your dog a lot or physically doing stuff to your dog, your kid's going to pick up on doing that too. I've seen in again, not shaming anybody, but I've seen it where I'm like, ugh, I see the kid yelling at the dog and the dog looks uncomfortable. So we want to try we know that our dogs are watching us, and we know equally our kids are watching us of what we're going to do and how we're moving about our day, and they're going to mimic that, of course. So very good point, Ashley. And this was jam-packed today. I'm so glad, man. We could go on and on. I love this topic. I think this is going to be super valuable for people. I appreciate you coming on, not only as a certified dog trainer with knowledge and expertise in this, but somebody who is currently going through having the baby dog thing going on. So I love having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time. And real quick, if people are listening and want to connect with you, would love to take a moment. How can people connect with you, and where can they find you?
So I am most active on Facebook. It's Fetching Petential, so PET, kind of a pun. Then I also have a website, fetchingpotential.com. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram. I will admit, I'm not the biggest Instagram user, so it's kind of dead. I do hope to kind of resurrect that as I get better and learn Instagram a little bit more.
There's so much to do on all these platforms. It's like
Oh
a
my
second
gosh.
job. It's a lot.
I
I
figured
get
I
it.
could just master one and then move on. So
That's yeah. Hey, you got to do what you can. That's all we can do with all this social media stuff. So, all right, good. And thank you for that spelling. So it's fetching potential, PET, potential.
yeah.
Ashley, you've been great. Thank you so much. And congratulations again on your growing family. And it's very exciting, I'm sure, and exhausting, but I'm sure it's exciting as well. So I'm glad that you came on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Oh, no problem. I hope we could chat again, and thanks again. And I almost forgot my tagline here. And for those listening, treat yourself and treat your dogs.